And then you just create an archetype. And like, I think in a lot of ways, that's the Charlie thing to the furthest extreme.
Charlie loved life.
This is someone that wants us to buy this bullshit so bad. This is someone that legitimately wants us to buy this. I'm telling you, this is not real. Like, you want me to buy this? Is not fucking the global fucking Academy Awards. I don't know what you got going on, sis. So I used to solve shit for a living. Let me tell you guys something. When someone's lying to you, the first thing they try to do is convince you, right? And the only way I can convince you is by invoking your emotion into my emotion. So if I'm angry, I want to make you angry, because if I can convince myself I'm angry, I'm psychologically thinking that you're convinced I'm angry. And so when you go, and he saw the face of his Lord.
That whispering part where she kind of half whispers, I've never heard any human being communicate like that. And I've seen a lot of people.
Schultz and Joe Rogan bring up Charlie Kirk's widow out of the blue. Furthermore, why did they sound as like they knew something that no one else should? In the podcast, it didn't seem like a random moment. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a casual remark. Something in their voices caused the room to freeze, a pause that was longer than usual. It was more than a tale. It was an emotion. They seemed to have just revealed something that ought to have remained a secret. Schultz spoke first. There was a trace of surprise at the end, but his voice was gentle and sarcastic. He described a man who said things that he probably shouldn't have said, and he acknowledged that he would advise against saying those things if he were you. That casual comment opened a door. The room realized he wasn't merely conversing, but nobody knew who he was referring to. Rogan didn't say anything, he merely gave a nod. His mouth was slightly open as though he had heard this before, and his eyes were downcast. The audience paused because they could tell Rogan was thinking while he was silent. Furthermore, it was impossible to discern if his smile was an indication of agreement or anything else. The internet went crazy in the hours following the podcast's release. Everywhere, TikTok, Reddit, X, cut it out, slowed it down, and looked at each person's face frame by frame. Interview.
I think he said a few things, and if I was his friend, I would say, don't say it like that. I know what you're trying to say, but don't ever say, when I go into a cockpit, I hope that the pilot, if he's black, is qualified. I know what you're trying to say. You shouldn't hire underqualified pilots. But saying it like that,
just because of the color of their skin.
He's probably not hanging out with black people, not knowing how offensive they.
Few focused on Rogan's eyes. A few people examined Schultz's nod. The same thing was said by all of them. Something's here. They are not disclosing it. However, it wasn't what they said that caused everything to blow up. They said it that way. The audience is left unsure of what was real and what was manufactured by the silences, fleeting smiles, and half-serious, half-joking remarks. Because Schultz remarked, "If you think that's true, then you're special," with a smile and a lowered voice a few seconds later. He chuckled. Rogan chuckled. The audience, however, didn't. Everything was flipped upside down in those few seconds. Millions of individuals started to wonder, what were they hinting at? Why at this precise moment? Furthermore, why discuss Charlie Kirk's widow while the world was still in the dark about what was actually happening? Everyone wanted to think they had a clue, but nobody knew the answer to that question. Both Schultz and Rogan were astute, cautious individuals who understood how to express ideas without actually saying them. Thus, the audience thought there had to be a reason if they were discussing her. Some assumed they were making a joke. Others maintained that it was merely a psychological test or a precursor to something more significant, such as a revelation. Whatever it was, though, it was effective. Because Rogan and Schultz had the internet in stitches with just a gaze, a half smile, and a 2-second silence. The scariest thing is that what they decided not to say, rather than what they stated, just silence, allowing the public to fill in the blanks without confirmation or denial, and 1,000 theories were created in that space.
Everyone who is watching this, restreaming this, if you think this is genuine, you are very special. You are very unique. This is some of the worst acting. Like, she would give fucking the people that are on those Hallmark shows a run for their money. Give me a break. Give me a break. You could restream me all of them all you want to. If you buy into this, this says more about you than it does.
Every inquiry, every grin, every quiet moment is deliberate. Then they mention a name in the midst of what seems to be an unconnected conversation. The wife of Charlie Kirk. In a way that makes the listener sit up straight, as though there's something here that we've all overlooked, rather than in an inquisitive or sympathetic manner. The woman who came out of the occurrence, the public continues to see it with sympathy. However, Rogan is avoiding discussing pain. He is discussing action. In the podcast didn't need
Charlie Kirk's wife, who the day Charlie Kirk was murdered, I said I felt for, I still do, for her and her kids. She's grifting now. Charlie Kirk is worth tens of millions of dollars. That's a fact. That's not an opinion. And his wife is going on social media and asking people for donations and money. What is she doing? Other than grifting, what else would you call that? If you're going to get donations, why wouldn't you use it for something like, I don't know, helping the homeless, doing something about those that are mentally ill, for example? There's so much you could do with these donations of money that can help society. Instead, she's going to be using it for herself. And I say to myself, your husband was worth tens of millions of dollars. Why are you grifting and asking for money before your husband is even 6 feet underneath the ground? I find this distasteful and I find it disgusting.
to say much. Just one sentence. There's something wrong with this. That sentence, short, cold, and vague, was like a spark dropped into a sea of doubt. You're implying that
our turning point, let's say family, but I want you guys all to see the Medal of Freedom and be able to look at it in the back of it. You guys are all part of the legacy. So and then on the back, it's the first and last time I'll put a cross on it. I literally will say things to all of you. Like I'm not, I don't care. Everyone can have their own and see.
there is a significant probability of assault among Charlie Kirk's acquaintances. Social media then took off. She was examined by others. All of the details, her facial expressions, her happy videos, and her articles about faith, hope, and continuity all became proof at once. Neither Schultz nor Rogan argued that she was mistaken. They simply let the audience fill in the blanks. And strange things happened in that void. Charlie Kirk's death? No, his passing. Could not have been a family matter if he was genuinely the face of a movement. Millions were impacted. Now that his widow is at the heart of every action she took was interpreted as either sincere or shrewd. Every move might be interpreted in a different way, thus the more deeply one examined, the stranger it felt. A post may be a strategy or an homage. A smile can be a mask of control or a sign of strength. And for that reason, the audience responded emotionally when Rogan and Schultz brought her up. They were discussing more than a single individual. They discussed how trust functions in the era of media, when everything has the potential to be real or appear real. During his lifetime, every single thing Charlie said, every speech he delivered, and every tweet he sent had an impact. It spread. It was passed along. It was cited. It was disgusting. He was more than just an influential thinker. He was extraordinary. People therefore believed that the spotlight would die with him. However, it didn't. The light remained bright. It simply moved from him to Charlie Kirk's widow, who was standing next to him. She didn't have to try, which made it odd. She didn't cry. She remained calm. She made no appeal for pity. She simply appeared and spoke in a slow, steady, nearly flawless voice. Although she stood motionless while the world was in chaos, and people couldn't take their eyes off of her serene demeanor. It was dubbed tranquility. Some claim it's a calculation. Whatever you name it, though, she has turned into a mystery. She is now older. I don't know what else would happen if this wasn't coached and rehearsed beforehand. This is meeting all the requirements for completing 3 crucial elements. 1, engrossing you in her feelings. She's a honeypot, in my opinion. I'll tell you the truth. She is, in my opinion, a complete honeypot. I don't think there was any truth to that marriage. I'm not sure how many of you want to watch the remainder of this. I don't believe a single thing she says. There is nothing in this chat that demonstrates to me how much you care about this individual. I apologize. You would be discussing my initial encounter with him. I recall my first encounter with Charlie. I recall his location. I recall asking if anyone had ever heard a Chancho eulogy. She was mentioned by Andrew Schulz and Joe Rogan as a casualty of the course, not in a formal interview or in a program about the incident's tongue, a brief comment that was enough to make the internet go crazy. Nothing happens by chance with Rogan and Schulz. Even a casual mention of someone is frequently a precursor to something more. They know how powerful a half sentence can be. With only a frown or a subtle smile, they are able to sow doubtful seeds. Therefore, devoted fans are aware that it is not an error when the name Erica Kirk is spoken in the midst of an apparently unrelated discussion. This is a clue, a calculated blunder, a moment intended to pique millions of people's interest. And it was successful because the internet was ablaze with that line, that smile, and that face in a matter of hours. The same subject was being discussed on social media platforms ranging from X to TikTok. What are they aware of that we are not? An ordinary podcast moment became a conflagration. Speculations, theories, emotion analysis videos were everywhere. People slowed down every second. Red lips looked at eyes-framed shots. A pursed smile from Rogan became a signal. A nod from Schulz was interpreted as a confirmation. From that moment, curiosity turned into doubt, and doubt quickly turned into a global fever. Intentionally or unintentionally, a spark became an unstoppable fever.
She seems really upbeat, really happy, only days after her husband was assassinated. That looks like smiles. That looks like laughing and happiness and joy. So many people notice this. Erica was laughing right after her husband was assassinated. Now, I'm not saying she's celebrating. I'm saying it's weird.
Fire of rumors, and maybe that's precisely what they desire. To start people guessing but not to divulge anything. Because you don't need to say anything more once people begin to mistrust you. They'll take care of the rest. Everything happens so quickly. During what appeared to be a typical conversation, a few political remarks, a few light giggles, Andrew Schulz abruptly leaned back in his chair, exhaled deeply and said, half laughing, half hesitating, "You know what's weird? Nobody has actually mentioned Charlie's widow's fate." But like a piece of metal hitting glass, the sentence fell onto the table. Nobody spoke. The mood of the room altered when Rogan stopped in the middle of his statement and cocked his head. If you've been watching Rogan for a while, you'll be able to identify the expression in his eyes when he feels that someone has said something inappropriate. Possess. Schulz chuckled, his laugh sarcastic and weary. "God, I'm getting old," he mumbled. He wasn't quite kidding, though. He appeared somewhat perplexed and defensive, as though he had suddenly realized he had opened a door that he was unable to close. This was no haphazard incident. Nobody thought the remark was a joke. It contained each of the three components of a slip. A little hesitation, a hint of emotion, and then, as if to hide it, a final affirmation. Schulz continued after that. His voice trailed off, frightfully candid. "I think she's an archetype, a figure designed to play with emotions. I don't think that love story is real. As the general public perceives it, I don't think it ever truly existed." Rogan glanced up, laughing. Not with laughter, but with comprehension. This was something he had heard before, maybe from someone else. He didn't say it, though. He simply left it alone, and the entire conversation felt oddly heavy because of the stillness. Schulz was not interrupted. Nobody brought up another topic. They allowed him to finish. He brought up the finances, the post-mortem declarations, the rituals, and then said, "Frankly, I didn't believe any of it." There was no mention of her suffering. Everything was a performance. He hesitated. Rogan also hesitated. The silence was nearly deafening, and the moment lasted longer than a breath. For those, it was an odd moment to see the show live. There were only two men staring at one another. There was no background music, no laughter, and no breaks. The other person knew full well that the truth was dangerous, and the first person had just blurted something too true. You've probably noticed that Rogan has a habit. When someone comes into contact with something, he smirks, leans back a little, and looks to the left, indicating that he is sensitive. And that is just what he did. The audience knew without the need for words. They were aware of his thoughts. Thus, Schultz's voice shook a little as he went on. "I apologize, but I don't think she was telling the truth. She read from a script that had previously been published for the public, and everything was too flawless and edited, not because I despise her." There was silence in the studio. The audience heard more than any words during that quiet. They heard the contradiction, skepticism, and an invisible terror. Fear that there was a deeper meaning to the story, something neither Schulz nor Rogan dared to reveal directly. That brief moment, just a few seconds, was sufficient to transform a pointless discussion into a feeling as everyone could relate. They were the only ones who knew anything. And it must be because they are unable to, if they decide to say it halfway, complete. Half smiling. Half serious, Rogan turned to face Schultz and muttered, "Yeah, there's a reason for that." A single sentence. However, it sounded like a hidden knock. Schultz said that, and Rogan remained silent. He didn't bring up another topic. Didn't grin as he always did. Instead, he smiled tightly as he leaned forward. A half-challenging, half-acknowledgement smile. "Yes," he answered very quietly, nearly whispering. "There's a reason for that." That was the end of it. Nothing. There was only a brief silence. No name, no explanation, no context. But it ignited the internet. The fire was started by the absence of words. In order to see what Rogan was thinking, viewers instantly slowed down each frame, added subtitles, and even lightened his face. In a few hours, hundreds of videos of emotion analysis were abundant. Tick-tock, that smile was again played back. They claimed that his eyes moved a little, as though he were recalling something he shouldn't have, or as though he had revealed a piece of a secret they had both vowed to keep to themselves. The threads continued to appear on Reddit. According to some, Schultz's face spoke for itself. It wasn't a slip of the tongue, as evidenced by the look. Others implied that they were communicating in code, a covert exchange between those who are aware of something but are unable to express it aloud. The most peculiar aspect was that Charlie Kirk had nothing to do with the podcast episode. There is no theme, no title, and no justification for mentioning the name, which makes it all the more wary. Why did they all make a mistake at that precise moment if it wasn't scripted or part of the setup? After speaking, why did they decide to remain silent? "There's a reason," Rogan remarked. But why did he seem to remember something that he should have forgotten? As the video fans awaited an official reaction, an explanation, a clarification, or at the very least a tweet to reassure the public as the news spread quickly, Rogan, however, remained silent. Not a reply, not a line, not an emoji. He left everything hanging as though the answer lay in the stillness. That quiet struck a deeper chord, more than any declaration. It did this by letting the public's imagination run wild, not because it was lacking in substance. Individuals started to fill in the blanks. Everybody wrote a story of their own. There are innumerable conspiracy theories mixed in with some fact and some conjecture. And the media uproar started when Rogan stopped talking to search elsewhere. The studio's attention turned to Erica Kirk, the woman they had just addressed. Once commended for her poise, the widow is now unexpectedly at the heart of a fresh storm. She had become a symbol of loss and courage, a role model for perseverance. However, when two influential media figures brought up her name in such an odd way that everything that had been deemed lovely started to take on a new meaning. Every time she was in front of the camera, viewers started to pay close attention to every detail. Were her eyes genuine?
Have we gone from this?
That young man. I forgive him.
Which was the 21st of September, and now 7 days later, we get this.
Nothing is changing, but I want to preface, we're not awkward. We're not like weird. We're not cringe. We're not going to be tweeting as if it's him. That's tone deaf and really disturbing. And anyone who does that's like morbidly off.
Hey, we're going to be doing about 5 more episodes a week now. So just tell the team and make sure that happens.
3 hours of this, 2 more hours of podcast.
There is just something that just doesn't feel right. It feels wrong. It feels off. And I am trying so hard not to over-speculate, but it's hard when stuff like this is being put out to us. It's just not normal. It doesn't feel natural. I feel like we're watching a performance. It's almost like we're watching a movie unfold right in front of our eyes. And it's things like this that make me think that Charlie Kirk's assassination is so much bigger than we could ever imagine.
This will live on. The team is keeping this alive because we have Charlie in each and every one of us.
Old clip. Were her eyes genuine? Was she trembling when she spoke? Did she make a two-control gesture to compare energy? Old footage of her was unearthed, rewound, and positioned next to Rogan's video. There was controversy surrounding every word she spoke, every smile she made, and even the way she held her hands. All attention had been diverted by Rogan's silence, and she had been pulled into the storm's eye without accomplishing anything. A flurry of gossip, of mistrust, as well as queries that remain unsolved. Because sometimes a pursed smile can rewrite history in a time when a facial expression can alter a narrative. All of her earlier remarks and video were replayed in slow motion, examined and examined frame by frame. Now, every word she had ever spoken, every time she had taken a breath, was being broken down like a clue in an unsolved puzzle. Previously referred to as sympathetic interviews were now seen in a new light. Was it public-pleasing rhetoric or was it genuine altruism? The query persisted in slipping in. Is she concealing something? Is she defending someone? Previously seen as spiritual, the quiet strength was now interpreted as a tactic of quiet. There was more noise than ever before, but no one talked. Instead than seeming like the end, it felt like the start of something meticulously planned, structured, and systematic. It started off as a few remarks beneath Rogan's podcast clip, but by the following morning, it had taken off. Globally, hashtags pertaining to Schultz, Rogan, and Erica Kirk were trending. In addition to turning up the background noise and slowing down the audio, viewers reported hearing a whispered voice behind the camera saying, "Don't say that." Additionally, Andrew Schulz liked a mysterious tweet on Twitter out of the blue. Some tales never really finish. They simply pause. Rogan enjoyed it too a few minutes later. Is it a coincidence? It was not believed by the internet. The cascade of events started. Timelines, screenshots, TikTok videos, and Reddit analysis are all stacked high. People compared Erica's post with Rogan's silence. Erica posted an old picture of herself and her husband with the statement, "The truth will outlast anything." The internet went haywire. Some claimed it was merely the nostalgia of a widow. Others asserted that it was a warning, a signal to a viewer, or even a coded message. Conspiracy outlets pounced, referring to it as a digital trail, a series of secret messages, and an apparently harmless post. It was impossible for even mainstream journalists to remain in the dark. Were Rogan and Schultz hinting at something they couldn't say in public? They started to inquire. The more hours that go by, the more silent it gets, and the more complicated and dark the theories are. Some people think it's a cover-up. According to the other viewpoint, it is an expose. We simply aren't yet intelligent enough to recognize it. However, they have one thing in common. Since they are no longer seeking the truth, nobody can stop watching. They're captivated by the enigma. The internet had nearly fallen apart by this time. There were now two camps, each of which thought it knew the truth. Andrew Schultz and Joe Rogan were accused by one side of unintentionally tapping into reality, a tale more significant, profound, and perilous than anything they had ever stated in public. They said that Charlie's widow wasn't merely grieving and silent. She was concealing something that could completely alter how the public perceived his last days, a missing piece of the puzzle. The opposing viewpoint maintained that it was all media theater. Rogan was an expert at igniting debates. Tragically, Erica Kirk found herself enmeshed in a whirlwind she did not start because Schultz merely fueled the flames. But regardless of your stance, there was one thing that could not be denied. Everything was too good to be true. Like a mystery live film, every pause, post, and no seemed manufactured, making it impossible for viewers to discern what was real and what was contrived. Erica said nothing as millions argued. No interviews, no justifications, no vocalization to stop gossip. Simply a quiet confidence that few understood, a frigid calm. And slowly, that quiet turned into her weapon and armor. Since saying nothing was the most effective method to make a message in a time when everyone was trying to get attention. Rogan and Schultz kept releasing new episodes while talking about different subjects. However, the deadly film would not go away. It was altered, remixed, and reposted once a week. The audience assumes that there was an emotional code, a truth concealed in the looks, grins, and the way they stopped before speaking, between those words. Was the dance intentional or merely a coincidence? Nobody was certain anymore. The phrase millions of spectators believed they had one more hint to something significant, something they couldn't identify, as the lines between reality and rumor had officially merged. The cacophony continued as the weeks went by. New ideas were developed daily, and the Rogan and Schultz footage kept making an appearance in response podcasts and analysis videos. Every group asserted that they had figured out the dialogue. Some others think the two were covertly defending someone, maybe Charlie's closest friend or relative. Some claim that they are merely expressing what the rest of the world is scared to acknowledge. In any event, one thing is evident. Rogan, Schultz, and Erica are no longer the only characters in this mystery. It concerns the online. According to others, Rogan and Schultz were being overtly warning by expressing things that were too subtle to convey directly, but were clear enough for people who didn't agree to hear them. Some people think that's where the true genius is, not in their words, but in their silence. They transformed a 15-second podcast spot into an interlude of quiet.legend on the internet. Erica remained in the middle of it all, collected, calm, and apparently unmoved. She remained silent, didn't defend herself, and oddly, her fan base increased even more quickly. It's not simply the tragedy or the rumors that make this story so captivating. It is the notion that time, influence, and truth may all clash, producing results that no one could have anticipated. Rogan's raised eyebrow, Schultz's silent acknowledgement, and Erica's straightforward caption. And so it continues. Thousands of theories are being developed by millions of people. Perhaps there isn't a secret, or perhaps that's what they want us to think. In a time when interest quiet is no longer absence, and it spreads more quickly than the truth. It's a tactic, and this story will never really end as long as people continue to search for hidden significance. Therefore, what happened is no longer the true question. However, did Andrew Schulz and Joe Rogan unintentionally discover something more significant than they initially believed? Or was it all part of an elaborate plan to make the world ask again? Whatever it was, it worked. People watched. People guessed. No one could put it down. That's the power of mystery. It keeps you scrolling even when the truth stops fitting, because maybe the truth isn't buried at all. Maybe it's hiding in plain sight, disguised as a podcast joke or just a quiet caption under the widow's photo. One thing's for sure, this story isn't over yet. And when the next piece of the puzzle comes, it won't just shake the internet. It might even rewrite how we see the truth itself. If you want to get ahead of that wave, leave your thoughts below, subscribe, and stay with us. Because in a world where silence speaks louder than words, the next word could change everything.